This man was unlucky enough to get off the plane and be told his country was gone. His visa and passport were invalid and he couldn't go anywhere but the airport. This is a true story of a man named Viktor. He didn't speak the language, so when he was detained by US Customs, he was confused and had no idea what was going on. Even when he heard the news that the president of his country had been killed in a coup, he said good. The supervisor had no choice but to show him that this bag of potato chips is your country and this apple is a rebel.
No more Krakosia.
Thinking he understood, the supervisor went on to say that you are now stateless and cannot return to your country or enter the United States. Until a new government is formed and diplomatic relations with the US are re-established, you'll be confined to the airport, and you can't use your country's currency. Customs gave Viktor a couple of meal tickets, a 15-minute phone card and a pager for humanitarian reasons, but Viktor still didn't get it, thinking that the service in American airports was pretty good, until he saw the news of the coup d'etat in his country on TV. He finally realized that his home was gone. Viktor was heartbroken. He was desperate to call his family but he didn't know how to use the phone card. But he couldn't use the phone card and couldn't speak the language to get help. To add insult to injury, his coupons were blown away by the wind while he was doing a favor for someone else and then taken away by the cleaners as trash. Now he had nothing. At night he found an abandoned terminal and put 2 rows of chairs together to make a bed, so at least he could sleep. The next day Viktor took a quick shower in the bathroom. He took some free cookies, squeezed ketchup and salsa on them, and layered them on top of each other to make a secret burger. But it wasn't enough to fill him up, so he went back to the cafeteria and stared at the leftovers. He was about to go in and a woman blocked him. Turns out the woman came to return the car. The woman put the car back in its place and a dime came out of the machine. Viktor immediately saw an opportunity. For every card he returns he earns a coin. 3 coins could buy a hamburger, and Viktor ate like a starving man. It was the first full meal he'd had since he'd been stuck at the airport for days. So next thing he knew, he was collecting carts for money. When he saw a kid hogging a cart, he'd just drop it and give him a pat on the head. Soon he's got a whole line of carts with coins popping out of them. Then he went to the restaurant and cashed in a deluxe set meal and ate with great satisfaction. Now that the problem of food and clothing is solved, the next problem is communication. In order to survive in the airport, you need to be able to speak the language. So he bought 2 books with the same content, one in English and one in their country's language. So he learned English by himself, sentence by sentence. After studying for a while and being exposed to it all day long, he was able to communicate with people by guessing. But just as he was getting used to life at the airport, trouble came. The airport supervisor saw him walking around the lobby in his pajamas, naked in the toilet, showering and sleeping in the terminal, obviously affecting the image of the airport. And the supervisor, who had worked hard for most of his life, had recently been given a promotion, so he couldn't allow anything to happen. So he came up with a plan to get rid of Viktor. He told Viktor that every day at 12 p.m. when the airport guards change shifts, the gate would be unattended for 5 minutes. Obviously, he was imploring Viktor to leave. Then as soon as Viktor steps outside the airport gate, he arrests him for illegal entry. The rest was a matter for the police, not for him. What he didn't realize was that Viktor was about to walk out of the airport when he suddenly stopped. Supervisor in the back of the monitor, anxious to keep shouting go off, quickly go off. It turned out that Viktor sensed something wrong, how the side of the monitor is always following their own. After some thought, he realized it was a trap. So he shouted at the camera, recently learned the word, I will wait for it. The supervisor was furious and the next day he cut off Viktor's business. The next day, he created a special position to collect carts, forcing Viktor to once again subsist on Skittles. But that night, the tables were turned. For every card he returns he earns a coin. 3 coins could buy a hamburger, and Viktor ate it like a madman. It was the first full meal he'd had since he'd been stuck at the airport for days. So the next thing he knew, he was collecting carts to make money. But when the supervisor found out, he was so mad that he cut Viktor off the next day. He created a special position for cart collectors, forcing Viktor to live on crackers again. But that night, a change of scenery came. A delivery man at the airport approached Viktor and offered him 3 meals a day. The catch was that Viktor would help him chase a girl named Jessie. Jessie was a visa officer, and Viktor went to her place every day to see if he could get a pass. So the delivery man asked Viktor to find out what Jessie liked. When Viktor heard how easy it was, he said yes. So from that day on, he spent every day chatting with Jessie while he did his business. At night, he told the delivery man what he had gathered. At the same time, he also warned the delivery man that Jessie was a good girl and that if he could be with her, he must not let her down. After many messages, the delivery man finally decided to confess his love. He asked Viktor to give a box to Jessie. Jessie opened it and saw a diamond ring. In the restaurant, the delivery man waited in anticipation, unaware that Jessie was already behind him. And so, with Viktor's help, the lovers were united, and so Viktor and the delivery boy became good friends. The delivery man introduced him to the cleaner and the head of security. But you can't survive on friends alone. So Viktor tried to get a job, but everyone turned him down because he had no nationality or status. Frustrated, Viktor wandered around the airport. Suddenly, he saw a rough wall and instantly became a professional. He grabbed his tools and started working. It turned out he was a senior architect by trade. All night long, he was absorbed in his work, and before he knew it, He was working at dawn. He was admiring his masterpiece when he turned around and the construction team was standing behind him. The foreman took one look at his walls and decided to hire him at $19 an hour, which was more than the airport manager made. The supervisor, of course, was not going to let him get away with it, so he came up with a plan to get rid of him. An old man with a mop in his hand and tears in his eyes rushed towards the plane. He was going to stop the plane with his own flesh and blood. Everyone thought he was crazy. Only Viktor knew why. Because the country is at war. Visas and passports are invalid. Viktor had been stuck at the airport for 3 months. That day, the supervisor came up with another way to get rid of him. He told Viktor that all you had to do was to say that you were afraid of your own war-torn country and I would grant you political asylum. That way you can walk out of the airport with a clean slate. But no matter how much the supervisor tried to fool Viktor, he wouldn't fall for it. And that made the supervisor even more furious. He vowed that as long as he was here, Viktor would never set foot in New York. One morning not long after that, Viktor suddenly got the good news that his friend told him the war was over. It turned out that peace had returned to Viktor's country. His friends celebrated the fact that he was finally free to go to New York. But when he excitedly presented his papers to Jesse for stamping, Jesse said that this kind of visa required the signature of a supervisor. Viktor knew the superintendent would give him a hard time, but he didn't realize that the director would threaten him with his friend. The supervisor said, "You can go back to your country, but you can't go to New York or your friend will be in trouble. First of all, the delivery guy brought you into the airport kitchen several times. That's a violation. I could lose his job for that. And the janitor. He's a fugitive who stabbed a man in India. Then he smuggled himself into the US and hid out until now. I could have him deported in a minute." After hearing that, Viktor was scared and had to give up going to New York for his friends. The janitor, who knew he was going back to his country, didn't understand and even yelled at him.
"You are a coward! You are a coward!"
At this point, the police officer could not stand it any longer. So he told the cleaner the truth. When Viktor was waiting for the plane, a shocking scene appeared. The janitor, with a mop in his hand, rushed towards the plane. He used his weak body to stop the plane, causing Viktor's flight home to be delayed. Everyone was shocked by him.
"I'm going home! Get lost!"
Viktor was touched by the old man's sacrifice for himself. At this moment, he knew what he had to do. He was going to walk out of the airport and go to New York to fulfill his father's last wish. When the airport staff heard the news, they dropped their work and came to see Viktor off. But when he arrived at the gate, he was met by a large group of guards. The first guard told Viktor to turn around. Viktor thought they were coming to arrest him, but it turned out to be.
"It's snowing in the city and you're gonna need that. Good luck."
And so it was that after 9 months, Viktor finally set foot in New York.